Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Art of Protection, where the author and I discuss all things relating to close protection, utilising designated, incidental, and counterintelligence. In this episode, I asked Michael a number of questions about the use of technology in close protection. We also discussed other topics, including staying up to date with emerging technology, what tech is enhancing, should all CPOs be trained in cybersecurity, the use of translation systems, TSCM, why was so much TSM content removed from this book, bugging devices, vehicle tracking devices, and how to identify illicit device circuit components. I hope you enjoy this episode. That's all for today. Thank you for joining us on another episode discussing the art of protection, and we look forward to welcoming you again on the next episode. So now we're going to look into intelligence. No, we're not actually. We're going to look into technology.
Yeah.
So which emerging technology do you believe is going to have the most impact in the next 5 years? Obviously, technology is a very quickly growing thing.
AI is obviously going to be, the only reason I say AI is because you said emerging. So the quickest emerging technology generically, regardless of security or not, is obviously AI. So we, I think, need to integrate it into protection efforts as much as we can without it being something that can help potentially compromise our efforts. But, you know, there are other technologies as well. I feel like you've got a lot of questions there, so I should probably slow down and answer the first one and answer them one by one.
Okay. So let's go into drones. You talk about drones.
Drones, obviously, drones have been around for a long time. They've been in the private sector for a while now. They've been privately available for, I don't know how many. I think I took my son out to buy a drone. He was really young. I want to say about 11 years ago. I want to say 2014, I think. And it was amazing. It was a HD camera. It was really good. And that story is not relevant, by the way. Sorry, I don't know why I mentioned that, but I think it's just because drones have been around for a while. How can we use them in the private sector? And it's so obvious. It's more to do with surveillance and protection. So we can use drones for surveillance to some extent, because the downside of drones, and we mentioned this in a previous recording, that they make too much noise. It's just too fucking.
I feel like there's a big bug behind me or something.
Yeah, they're so fucking loud.
And they're very obvious.
That's what I mean. And they got flashing. Obviously, they have to have flashing lights, right? So that's the downside with generic drones. We can use them for security, for basic research, whether it's a recce of a house, or we can use them as part of a patrol. We can use it potentially to find, and they've been used to find, lost children that have been lost. There was one incident in a sort of a massive field of wheat, I think it was, and they couldn't find this toddler. And obviously they put a thermal camera on it, and they found him in about an hour, just calling through the wheat. And anyway, so the point is, it has many multitude of applications. Drones, aerial footage is extraordinarily useful. It always has been. It's been used as far as aircraft's been around. So yes, very useful in the private sector. Close protection wise, I suppose we can limit it to things like reconnaissance, additional protection. The downside with them at the moment, though, generally speaking, is the battery life, the noise, and potentially the sort of regulatory restrictions that are in certain jurisdictions.
So how do you recommend integrating it without becoming too reliant on a drone? Because I feel like it could be very easy to become over-reliant on these sorts of technologies.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know. With drones, I think it's just, it would be an additional sort of countermeasure potentially to help us sort of see threats from a wider distance. When I say this, I'm talking sort of relatively low level security. If you've got a scenario where there's a sort of medium level threat in the first world country, then yeah, having something like that may be beneficial. I feel like drones at some point will become more autonomous. I think they probably already are in the public sector, but in the private sector, they're not really. And if they are, they're extraordinarily expensive. So we're going to have to wait for that price of that technology to come down. So I think over-reliance with aerial footage, I don't think at any point in the near future we're going to be over-reliant on it. Honestly, it's not either, because they don't need to be right now. So I don't think that will happen anytime soon with drones specifically.
And how can your teams in your training course stay up to date? Obviously, we've just mentioned that how quickly technology is evolving without becoming too overwhelmed and distracting from like the core skills, because some people can, obviously, they're going to be out there on their own. They're going to see all these technologies after they've done the course as well, all developing. So how can we just relate that back just to the core skills without getting too... It can be overwhelming out there with all it, even like me not in this area, all the technologies that are coming.
I think it's hard because you have to do one of two things. You have to just do generic CPD and see what's available, or you specialize in something as well as, you specialize in something as a byproduct of what you do. So if you want to go into if you want to be a close protection operative and you have some sort of interest in cybersecurity, then you can do that. But as we said in a previous recording, like, cybersecurity is a really specialist field. So a lot of these things are very specialist. Cybersecurity probably more than others, actually. Go back to Jonas just because we mentioned that could be something that you could specialize in as part of your normal daily routine. So it doesn't require a huge amount of training. You got to understand how to fly the things, and you probably have to understand sort of local and possibly overseas jurisdictions as well, and restrictions that put in place by governing bodies. If it's the case that the principal has overseas residences or whatever. So I think that would probably be quite a good sort of side skill set to have, if you want to call it that. But the generic answer, I think, is just the CPD, continuous professional development, as with most things, is the endeavor to continually identify what technologies are becoming available to either yourself or to the enemy.
And you can talk about a technology being mission enhancing or just simply nice to have. So how do you assess whether a technology is mission enhancing or just simply nice to have?
Honestly, I don't know. It's a good question. Mission enhancing is really specific, isn't it? And it's obviously very subjective.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would really address that generically speaking, unless you apply it to a given set of circumstances. And I'm trying to think of examples now, and I probably can't think as quickly as I should. But I think one of the sort of side notes we should take into account is that, as man, we all love gadgets, right? So there's a solid chance that we're just going to get these things as an excuse to say they're part of the security effort, when really they're just a cool thing to have. Yeah. So, but at the end of the day, if the budget allows for it and it will be useful, if it's something that we can help save time with, then why not? That is mission enhancing, because we're saving time whilst maintaining the overall security sort of efforts principles. So, and that's principles, not principle. So yeah, I think if it saves time and it enables us to do the job more efficiently and effectively, then why not? As long as the budget allows for it. If it's something that we do need specifically to sort of help identify whether it's a sort of technological resource with regards to research, it might be some sort of open source intelligence tool that we need, then that would be mission enhancing, of course. So differentiating the two, I think, would be very, very subjective and difficult.
And cybersecurity obviously is a massive part in technology. So do you think that cybersecurity should be a pure skill, but all CP operatives going forward? Yeah. Why or why not? So cybersecurity training?
No, I don't. I think there should be basic principles that are understood, right? So I think as long as there are key elements that are underpinned, I do think actually at some point close protection operatives will need, or officers will need, to understand the basic vulnerabilities of someone digitally. And they should be maintained, those sort of countermeasures should be maintained at all times. And it might just be stupid things like, change your passwords frequently and having different passwords for every account and whatnot, and checking, the availability of those passwords being sold online or traded online. Those kinds of things are, I think, important for every operative to know. Do they? Not, absolutely not. We get people on our course, honestly, that they have email accounts, and we've had it. It's nuts. So we have a really sort of idiot's guide. It's like idiot's guide is probably not a polite way to put it, but it's a step by step, and it is an idiot's guide how to log into, what the cloud service that we use, and then how to upload photographs. So it's literally, and you can see some of the candidates or some of the learners on a course are just like, fucking hell, really? Do you know what I mean? And then the others are like, honestly, like struggling to keep up. All right. So it's hard to say. My view is, yes, I think the regulators should take certain things out of the criteria. I think what we spoke about previously, route reconnaissance, discuss it, yes. Have to prove that you've done it. So having to provide evidence to an awarding body, I think that should be removed, and cybersecurity fundamentals should be put into it. If you've got people that honestly can't use a mobile phone, probably can't, know how to use a laptop. I'm not saying they're incapable of providing protection to an individual. However, I do think that we need to, future-proof these individuals.
Yeah.
If someone can be so vulnerable digitally, so well protected physically, I think there's an imbalance, and I do think it needs to be implemented soon.
So that goes on to my next question as well. What advice would you give teams for to avoid common failures when using like on-ground real life communication? Because it could like
Give that fucking feet.
real-time communication.
Give that.
So like what advice would you give to teams on the ground to avoid common failures when using real-time communication or translation systems on the ground?
Translation systems are going to be flawed, right?
Yep.
So that's point number one. I think I remember watching a film years and years ago. I can't remember what it was called. It might even be called The Translator, The Interpreter, something like that. And one of the opening scenes discusses how, wars have been started over misinterpretation.
Yeah.
So translating something, if it's live in real time, you need to make sure it's accurate, because misinterpretation of what someone's trying to say is really, really challenging. And I think I'm kind of sort of digressing slightly, but I think it's an important point to make. When someone from a different culture and, invariably like a different language to you is trying to communicate something to you, understand that, especially Brits, like we find everyone rude because we're so fucking polite. So don't misinterpret, or do your best not to misinterpret the way they come across to you. I'm going to say their rudeness, but that's it's not them being rude. It's just how we interpret it sometimes, and same vice versa. So I think that's really, really important. But going back to the actual kind of technology piece, technology failures are something. In technological failures, something going to happen all the time. We actually set the course learners up for failure. We have 40 radios that work for about 5 minutes and they break down. They're designed to do that, and it's so that we can see how they adapt and overcome the situation. But it's basic stuff like it should be part of a checklist or standard operating procedure before deployment. Test them, check the battery levels, carry spare batteries, carry a charger if necessary. Make sure that you have the ability to charge your kit, whether it is basic two-way radios or mobile phones or whatever it is. If it is an iPhone or any other mobile phone, actually, for that matter, make sure you have a mobile charger, maybe a wireless charger with you, so that you can get it. You don't need to carry a backpack or a day sack or anything like that. Just pack in basic stuff, charge your kit, and make sure it works at the time, and continuously check throughout the day.
Moving on to TSCM. Yep. So TSCM, what does it stand for?
Technical surveillance countermeasures. And annoyingly, countermeasures is one word in English language, I think it was the Americans that came up with this phrase. They claim a lot, the Americans, but this is actually true. I think they genuinely did come up with the phrase TSCM, despite the fact that countermeasures is one word. So in theory, it should be TSC.
So in the book and the TSCM section, the intro to the chapter actually says that in this book, or in the following chapter, I've left out certain things like voice over internet protocol, technical forensic analysis, mobile phone, PC, laptop monitoring, X-ray, wiretape, and more. So it's quite a lot. But why have you left this out of the book?
Well, because it has to fit within the scope of close protection to some extent. So what I wanted was to leverage some of the contents from the other book, the first book, Technical Surveillance Countermeasures, and give or provide a flavor as to what it is and the basic concepts of bug sweeping to someone who is interested in close protection. I think for example, if there was a medical section in the book, we would open a can of worms, and the next thing you know, it's the fucking doctors, idiot's guide to how to be a doctor. Bad analogy, I know, but I think at some point you have to cut out information and kind of keep and revise or revisit the scope of the actual close protection book. And yes, TSCM awareness is important, but that's exactly what it was. It was awareness. Again, proceeds from the book go to charity, right? But if someone wants the full version of that book, it's called Technical Surveillance Countermeasures, and it is just the kind of basic introduction to bug sweeping. And the more technical side of things are in there, but technical surveillance countermeasures actually goes way beyond the scope of the book. So our training programs are now far more in depth than what the book is based on.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very, very good fundamental guide.
Also, I feel like you don't want the book to be the training course.
Exactly, yeah. Especially that training course. We want it to be, yes, largely based around close protection, and TSCM is important. It really is. But we can't, there's only so much you can put in. I mean, voice over internet protocol, and I think if we miss wiretaps out and things like that, like the reason I'll tell you why I miss wiretaps out is because it's becoming, well, for a long period of time, it became sort of lost technology. Wiretaps is where someone could covertly monitor a landline telephone, right? My son is 17, he's 18 this year. He's never used a landline telephone, right? We gave him one once. He didn't know what to do with it.
That's crazy. I feel old because I've used one.
It was nuts. We was like, so it was around dial, and we were like, dial 0207, right? And he was like, and they were just, him and his nephew, even his cousin, sorry, my nephew, they were just pressing the buttons. They couldn't figure it out. Anyway, they landline telephones obviously no longer a thing. They haven't been for a while. However, wiretaps are becoming, they're making reappearances here and there, because what they can do in some cases is replicate the lines from which data is transferred. So when we use the internet, it goes through a data line, which is a different connection, but it's still telephone wires effectively. And they will travel, and they still use the Victorian cables that we laid under the sea years and years and years ago, like hundreds of years ago, to communicate from here to the US and the rest of the world. So telephone lines still exist. We still utilize, we leverage them for the internet, and fiber optic cables are replacing them here and there, but that's not the point. The point I'm trying to get at is wiretaps are becoming a threat again because of data, that's transferred through data lines. But again, it was too much of a deep dive into that area, and voice over internet protocol is the same thing. It's too much of a deep dive into a sort of realm. Yeah, bring awareness to it, mention it, but I don't think it's a deep dive into the area. That's why I had to admit so much of the stuff.
You also mentioned before you start the chapter as well, another thing is that you've heard about and you find it quite alarming. You do not use an NLJD to search person.
No, this is critical, right? Because we get this request a lot, and at the time writing that book, it wasn't put in there because I didn't. Well, we get a lot of requests for this, and I suppose at the time I was trying to be very, very formal, and I was less confident with writing a book. It was my first one, so I didn't put it in there in that way. But in this book, I decided, I don't really care anymore. I need to tell people this. Do not search people with NLJD, because there are some manufacturers that don't really take into, or they don't really care actually about the sort of dangers that are involved. Let me just clarify what it is I'm referring to here. So an NLJD, just very briefly, it works. It has a bilateral function. So it sends and receives a signal simultaneously. So there are two modules inside of it. One sends a signal, one receives a signal. But the signal it sends out is obviously using radio frequencies. The idea is that it will detect two pieces of metal meeting. It does this through a very sort of technical kind of area, which I won't discuss at the moment. But the point is, when it sends its radio frequency out, that frequency in some cases can be ionizing, can be dangerous to the human anatomy, right? Mm-hmm. It's like X-rays. X-rays are part of the radio frequency spectrum. They can be dangerous if misused. So when we get, as a company of TSCM International, get a multitude of requests for people to search their body. And I've seen and heard of people searching another human being with an NLJD. Not all manufacturers do this, but I don't definitively know this to be true, but I'm pretty certain, and I've heard through teaching internationally and working in places like China with Russians, that some of the manufacturers don't have any sort of reservation about using frequent radio frequencies that are dangerous to human anatomy when it comes to NLJD, because as long as it works, it's fine. Push it out there and it's fine. There's no warnings on it or anything like that. So I think, in short, the point I'm trying to get at here is, please do not use an NLJD on a human body. It can be dangerous. Yeah. It could be carcinogenic, cancer causing. And so I wanted to put the warning in there at a very early stage.
And then the first page of the book reads the following. So relates back to what you've already said. And shall I read it?
Yeah, read it. Why not? Know.
Book sweeping is a skill that all close protection officers, bodyguards, and residential security teams should have in order to establish and maintain a sterile environment safe from electronic surveillance. Sorry. Why do you repeat that at the start of this TCSM section?
Well, because that is when you open the book, Tentacles Raising Countermeasures, the book, when you open it, that's the first page, right?
Oh, so that's relating from...
Yeah, it was always, so when I wrote the book, the first two books, they both related directly to close protection.
Yeah.
Right? They weren't contextualizing the sense of in terms of close protection in that sense, but they were both written in a way that tie in with the protection of an individual. So it's like what we're talking about, cybersecurity. It's such an important skill set. It's a great skill set to have, but it's a very specialized area. It's like TSCM is exactly the same. Not all close protection officers can be trained in TSCM to a high level because it's so specialized. So what the idea is to say, right, as a business, because we have a very, very big TSCM brand, let's do the courses that we already have the courses, but like let's have the book formalized, push it out there, but contextualize it for close protection. And that's what I did. So it does the same with the surveillance chapters. It says surveillance is a critical skill set to have, blah, 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 for close protection officers. It's the same thing. Basically,
that's relating back to the previous book.
Yes, exactly. So I'm tying it all in with close protection, demonstrating why it's relevant.
Okay. So moving on, talk about bugging devices. Explain to us about this most 5 commonly that are referred to as bugs. Because maybe in here I think of a bug. When you first mentioned bugs, people, I thought, oh my God, you clear out bugs as well.
Honestly, we still
get inquiries.
Yeah. So bear in mind, offices in, I think, 12 cities in 7 countries or something, right? We still get people send big photographs of like cockroaches and stuff.
Yes. Bug sweeping, it sounds to me like you come in and you sweep out bugs.
We had one guy in Canada, probably shouldn't say this, he wanted to sort of work with us as an operative, and in the end we sort of told him no because he was very strange behaviour. And he went, no, I've got this great idea, I want to talk to Michael about it, I really want to talk to you about it. So I said, all right, tell me about it. I said, look, I've got an idea, it's going to blow your mind. So all right, go on. We'll do bug sweeping stuff, like the technical sweeps, but we'll also do sweeping for bed bugs at the same time. I was like, I thought it was a joke, obviously, and it weren't.
Yeah.
He'd be deadly fucking serious. I was like, listen, I'll think about it and get back to you. Obviously, it's fucking lunatic guy. But anyway, sorry.
He was generally being serious.
He's being fucking deadly serious.
How does anyone take you serious if you shoot bed bugs at the same time?
Yeah, exactly. I've come here to sweep your office, but let's go back to your house and we'll check for bugs. What the fuck? Who has bed bugs anyway?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the question?
The question was, you referred to there's 5 main points of bugging devices, right?
There are 5 main categories.
Types, yeah.
Yeah, there are 5 main categories. As it stands, it's unlikely that any device would fall outside of one of these 5 categories. Bear in mind, technical surveillance is obviously technical. It involves technology, and it's very, very fast paced because technology and gadgets, as it were, they've always been updated, and it's hard to keep on top of. And so, what the book tries to do is kind of just pause in the historical timeline and say, look, we understand there's technology, we're going to be discussing technology in quite some depth. However, we need to kind of draw the basic kind of highlight the basic principles and do our best not to kind of talk about future or the present, because it will become outdated very, very quickly. And honestly, I don't have any intentions to rewrite books. I'll just have nothing else to, it'll take up all my time. So what we've done is we've said, right, there's 5 key categories. They are listening devices, recording devices, covert cameras, vehicle tracking devices, or just GPS devices, doesn't have to be for a vehicle, and wiretaps, which we just discussed. So those are the main 5 types. So people challenge this on courses, but I came across a device and it does this. Like, yeah, but it falls into that category then. It's like, yeah, but it's a camera inside of a cup. It's like, what's a fucking covert camera then? Is it?
Yeah.
Is that you can't try and navigate me around it, because I've done my research and I know definitively, and I've been working in this field for a long time. Yeah, there are 5 main types, and that's what they are.
So radio frequencies and cellular signals.
Right.
I'm getting really proud of myself today with these big ones. Cellular signals. So what are radio waves? Explain to us.
Radio frequencies are a naturally occurring thing. They travel at the speed of light. The sort of theory behind it all is very, very technical. But radio frequencies can, range from 0 hertz all the way up to I think 300 gigahertz, I think. Again, I'm not very good at retaining numbers, so you'll have to forgive me if I get those wrong. But it's what most technology utilizes when it comes to covert monitoring, because even the sort of original listening devices will be transmitting the information through FM broadcast or AM broadcast frequencies. The more modern versions use GSM, so they'll be using mobile phone technology or what we call cellular frequencies. There's a massive misconception about how mobile phones don't use radio frequencies. It's not the case. Mobile phones most certainly do use radio frequencies. That's what they're based on. It's just called the cellular band. Some cellular bands. There are different names for it, obviously. GSM was one thing, but it's referred to in different ways. Ultimately, the range sort of varies anywhere between, or it ranges, from 700 all up to, at the moment, around 5 gigahertz. So 5,000 megahertz, and it is going to go beyond that with 6G technology. So it's a wide part of the spectrum. And yeah, I think the large part of the training program, what you've read, what the fuck? We're all going to fly.
I thought there was a fly in my head. I don't know what it was.
No, we're sterile here. No bugs in here. Sorry, basically they, I don't know where we are now. Sorry.
You're talking about the ranges. That moves on to my next question anyway.
Yes.
How do you determine, obviously you have devices that have an area of interest. How do you determine an area of interest?
Because the technology would only operate on certain frequencies. So Bluetooth, if it's a Bluetooth device, it'll operate on the 2.4 gigahertz range or the 5 gigahertz range. Mobile phone technology I just discussed. And it's important to kind of clarify what I mean by that. Radio frequencies and cellular technology is the same thing. However, we need to identify what the ranges are, because when we're doing something called spectrum analysis, we need to identify what's relevant to us, right? So spectrum analysis is, simply put, it's a graph from one number to a higher number, and everything in between is just like a load of lines going up and down. So this area of interest is all based upon what technology might be adopted by plug-in devices that are likely to be in a given environment. So you wouldn't, for example, look from 0 megahertz to 200 megahertz, because that's likely to be naturally occurring noise.
Yeah.
So it's that would be a totally pointless area for any operative to kind of investigate if they saw that on their spectrum analyzer. So what we say is that this area of interest, just focus on this, or set the spectrum analyzer to this range from number A to number B, and focus on that. And that becomes our area of interest. The interesting thing is, though, it varies region to region with regards to mobile phone frequencies or cellular frequencies. So if you're using a device in Canada and you see a mobile phone frequency, and then you come to the Middle East, that mobile phone frequency may be completely different. Same mobile phone or same bugged device and listening device that's using cellular technology. You put it here, would have to use a different network, and therefore the frequency may be slightly different, or it may be very different actually. So operatives need to be aware of that, and that's where it becomes a little bit confusing. The first the first reason element is getting them to focus and understand what cellular frequencies are within the spectrum. Second point is understanding and underpinning this sort of mindset that it changes from region to region, and that's quite frustrating. So there obviously we have lessons as to how that's kind of navigated.
And then we move on to your vehicle tracking devices. So you've got deployment and discovery.
Yeah, so in the surveillance training program, they're taught how to deploy them. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we leverage that information and explain to the TSCM operatives, which in theory should be the same people because they're going through a program, how to find them. But when you're looking for it physically without any equipment or just basic search equipment like torches and mirrors and whatnot, then it's beneficial to understand the mindset of the person deploying it, so as to be able to better, find these things. And understand, if you understand the functionality and how they're deployed and the nuances and the contributing factors as to what impacts the decision making of someone who deploys it, then you'll be better placed to understand how to find it. So that's what we do. We leverage that to enforce or enhance that learning.
And you explain a little bit, you go on to a little topic here saying safety first. So what do you mean by safety first?
I think I had to put that in the book. It doesn't sound like something I'd say. I'm not like a massive stickler for safety, honestly. But
yeah,
I tell you why it's relevant. Because we talk about the law quite a bit on our courses. So I think it's because of my background in law. I'm a bit obsessive when it comes to the law. But I'm also kind of fixated on this mindset that, especially security operatives, because the reputation of the industry isn't great. I think if we focus on understanding what our restrictions are or what our limitations are, legally speaking, then we will better at it. I feel like the reputation is kind of diminished because of a misunderstanding of the law or laws that impact what we do. So there's a heavy section on law. One of the big elements, obviously, health and safety. But the reason it's relevant to bug sweeping, and I think that's why I've really put it in there, NLJD thing, that's one, and not really discussed that. The second thing is, especially in someone's private residence or an office, we have to remove faceplates, so like plug sockets and things like that. And then I'm not going to go into this now, but it's also to do the Health and Safety at Work Act or the Work and Safety Health Act. So they're called different things in different countries. In the UK, Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 has two critical sections. Section 2 talks about the onus of the responsibility placed upon the employer, so the company that you're working for. They have to go through a sort of a process of ensuring that all operatives or all their staff are trained in certain elements of health and safety, and ensure as far as they reasonably can that their staff have, got everything in place to make sure they're in a safe environment. So we have to do that as a company for our operatives. However, the law has recognized that no matter how much training you give to someone, the individual has to be responsible for their own health and safety as well. So Section 7 crosses that off by saying, well, it takes care of it to an extent. It says essentially that every individual, every employee has to be responsible for their own safety, but also the health and safety of everyone else who is affected by their work or omissions.
Yeah.
Right? So if, for example, we contextualize it with faceplates like light switches, we have to remove them physically to, search, do basic searches behind the physical searches, and plug sockets as well. So when we do that, it's really important to reinforce this concept, because not doing it correctly may leave a wire exposed, or it may provide an opportunity for a toddler to put their hand or their fingers in and cause some sort of catastrophic event. And so it's reinforced in quite some detail in the book and on the training program, only for those reasons.
And then moving into deployment, there's obviously, you talk about in the book before, during, and after. So obviously there's different sections.
Well, vehicle tracking.
Yes, yeah. We're tracking device.
Yeah, vehicle tracking device. The deployment essentially breaks down to 3 key categories, which I think any training provider would do. It's just a sort of again, we will always refer to checklists. That's the way my mind works, and I think as a company we work like that as well. It's before, during, and after. Beforehand, and go through this very basic checklist, whether it's a mental checklist or a physical one. During, be cautious not to touch the vehicle. Try to deploy within a few seconds, ensure it has a good solid magnetic connection. But bear in mind, going back to health and safety, if a vehicle tracker is deployed and it's not deployed, it doesn't have a solid connection to the vehicle chassis or whatever it is. This is if it's using magnets. And it comes off at high speed. If it does that, some of these things can be quite heavy. If it comes off at high speed, it can cause serious damage. It'll bounce off it, smash into, potentially go in someone's windscreen. And, as obviously people traveling 70 miles an hour, that could be very, very dangerous. So and that's caused by someone's emissions. It's the lack of care, due diligence and attention to what they're doing.
And then you move on to the chapter just about circuit boards. Obviously, you've already explained it. It's not going to, in the book, you do mention you're not going to be a circuit board expert, but you have to touch on the topic. How relevant are circuit boards?
Yeah, the reason we did this was because of an interesting sort of scenario that happened on more than one occasion. So when we deploy, we deploy operatives all the time, but there were years and years, this was years ago, we had a couple of operative contacts to say, look, I've discovered this item with one of the search tools, methods, and I don't know whether it's a malicious device or not. Immediately, I thought to myself, well, how would you not know that? But then obviously I realized it's because they fucking trained in it. So in one example, it was a completely, normal piece of circuitry. I don't know why they found it or how they found it, but ultimately there was nothing wrong with it. On another occasion, they found something that was nefarious. So what I did in the training program quite early on, and I think this was around 2013, so it's quite a while ago now, is to implement a circuit board element so that they can identify normal components on any circuit board, but then separate those from the ones that only a nefarious or covert, an illicit device would have. And they include things like a SIM card connector, SD card connector, antenna.
Yeah.
So these things are quite basic, and the theory is quite obvious, really. If it has an SD card connector, that means it's recording something, whether it's audio footage or video footage. If it's got a SIM card connector, that means it's using cellular technology. If it's got an antenna, it's communicating with something, right? It's using radio frequencies to communicate. If it's got fucking microphones in it, and microphones can't always be easy to identify, but they're usually characterized by a red and white cable. Sometimes they'll have a muffler like this on it, but a tiny, like little tiny piece of foam. They're really, really small, obviously. But there are other elements like they need to identify and establish to help them establish whether or not this device is potentially malicious, and that's the reason for it.
This is a question that I've got. I'm just wondering, say if someone's doing a bug sweeping and they do miss something, who does that fall back on? Because obviously that could absolutely ruin everything.
It would fall back on them.
Yeah.
It's never happened, right? I'll tell you why. So we have, again, because we use a checklist, we have a sort of black box mindset as a company, right? Especially with bug sweeping, because things can be overlooked. So if they use every piece of search equipment and they do it properly and they do it in a way that's systematic within any given property, whether it's an office or residential property, then it's almost impossible for them to miss something. It's not impossible.
And they would be kind of following a checklist as well.
Yes. So
I'm thinking, how can someone remember all these things?
Oh, no. Yeah. So, well, there are three ways really: training, practice, but lastly, and probably more importantly, checklists. So we get this all the time. So if someone doesn't run a checklist, we don't not pay our operatives, obviously, but there is a temptation to say to them, and we do say this actually, if you can't follow the checklist, and if you don't submit your checklist, we may not pay you. I'll be honest with you, we're never not going to pay someone because they've done their work and people need to earn, right? So we don't not pay them, but we need to make sure they follow them as far as they reasonably can, and submit them afterwards. They actually have to submit them. So we say to them, look, in terms of how they do it systematically, it changes so much, very environment by environment. If I was to do a sweep of this room and then I'll go do a sweep of this all open area in this building, the sort of foyer area, it'd be a totally different process to some extent. As long as it's systematic, all areas are covered physically, and all tools are used properly and effectively, and then the cross checks are done. This is the critical part. The cross checks aren't done, then there is a chance something could be missed, but the cross checks mitigate it massively. So the cross checks ideally are done by a second person, a second operative, or done by the same operative a second time round. So if all of those things are done, there's like a 0.1% chance they'll miss something. The answer to your question is, if they miss something, it's down to them. A client won't recognize that. If we're talking about the commercial insight here, a client won't recognize that. They will see it as, I've been asked to pay a company to do a service, or I'm going to pay a company to do a service. If they haven't done it, they don't care about the individual operative being at fault. As far as they're concerned, it's the company. So ultimately, it'll be the company, right? But yeah, the short answer would be the operative, and it's never happened to us, right? Fortunately. And we have a guarantee as well. In fact, we took the risk very early on. We took a risk of saying, we're going to have a guarantee here. If we do miss something, we'll give someone double their money back, which, by the way, is a fucking big risk that everyone said don't do it. It could lead to catastrophe. So, but we did it anyway. And that policy has never been implemented. Touch wood. It has never been implemented because of the way we do things. So,
and the close protection officer would be required to carry out bug sweeping.
No, it'd be a bug sweeping operative. But
so they are two different sections.
Well, yeah, but what we're trying to enforce as a company and as a concept is that close protection officers should be trained in TSCM. It's a bit like they should be trained in cybersecurity to a certain extent. However, there are specialist areas. What we try to do on our training programs, they come on the training program, they learn to do close protection, of course, they become qualified and licensed in close protection. But we say to them, look, close protection isn't always a full-time job, right? So other work opportunities that will come about as a result of doing our training program are things like TSCM, which will present you with massive travel and work opportunities, globally, it really will. And obviously the surveillance element as well. So it gives you opportunities to work for the intelligence businesses and brands, as well as TSCM International, probably the biggest bug sweeping company in the world, as well as all of the close protection opportunities that present themselves.
Mm-hmm. That's all for today. Thank you for joining us and discussing the Art of Protection book that will be coming up very soon. We look forward to you joining us on our next episode.